The penthouse glass, overlooking the glittering San Francisco skyline, felt cold against Daniel's forehead. His marriage, like the city lights, was brilliant and meticulously arranged, a polished facade of success. But the silence in the apartment tonight wasn't peace. It was the hollow space left by his wife, Clara, and a text message that had arrived 4 hours ago from 30,000 feet. "Relax, honey. Just a last-minute trip with the boss." He knew better. He knew the cost of every lie, especially the one currently flying toward LA. If those quiet, dangerous moments, where fidelity is bartered for ambition and excitement, resonate with you, if you want to know what happens when the perfect life cracks, then stay with us. Don't miss a single chapter. The fog was swallowing the tops of the towers downtown, a soft, silent shroud that promised cool anonymity to the residents of Pacific Heights. Daniel Sterling stood by the floor-to-ceiling window of his $4 million apartment, the cool glass of the wine flute a small comfort in his palm. The apartment was aggressively modern, all polished quartz and muted grays, the perfect backdrop for a marriage built on mutual ambition and scheduled excellence. Tonight, it was also profoundly empty. His wife, Clara, was absent. She was 3 hours into a red-eye flight to Los Angeles, a last-minute critical summit with her CEO, Ethan Shaw. The lie was flimsy, yet it felt as resilient as the reinforced concrete holding up the skyscraper. He knew it was a lie the moment she packed a small, new leather duffel instead of her usual corporate carry-on, a bag that screamed weekend escape, not 7 a.m. board review. The confirmation when it arrived wasn't a confession. It was a single, casual text, delivered with the kind of breezy detachment one reserves for canceling a dentist appointment. Clara, 4:12 p.m. Wheels up, don't wait up, relax, honey, we'll call tomorrow. The last word, honey, felt like a deliberate, casual cruelty. It was a term of endearment drained of affection, used only now as a full stop to an inconvenient question. Daniel didn't text back. He merely set the phone down on the spotless marble counter, the screen facing up. He watched the white light of the new message slowly fade, mirroring the way the warmth had been slowly bled out of their decade-long relationship. He was a corporate attorney, specializing in high-stakes mergers and acquisitions, a field where emotionality was a fatal liability. For the past 3 years, his life had been a series of 18-hour days fueled by stale coffee and the pursuit of a partnership that promised financial immortality. He had been so focused on acquiring external success that he hadn't noticed the internal divestiture. He had ignored the increasingly long silences during their scheduled Sunday brunches, the way Clara's eyes lingered on Ethan Shaw during office holiday parties, an admiration that had curdled into something dangerously palpable.
He walked into the master closet, his own corner of the meticulously organized space. Clara's section was vibrant. Silk blouses, tailored Italian suits, the latest luxury leather. He noticed a small, telltale gap on the shelf where her work laptop, the one containing all her corporate emails and sensitive client data, should have been. She had taken it. This wasn't just a clandestine weekend. This was an executive mistake. His legal mind immediately clicked out of husband mode and into M&A mode. He wasn't thinking about jealousy or tears. He was thinking about leverage. Clara's company, Verve Digital, was preparing for a massive IPO, and Daniel's firm had done initial legal vetting. He knew the internal pressure points, the legal vulnerabilities, the deep secrets that CEOs like Ethan Shaw buried beneath layers of corporate privilege. He poured himself another glass, the movements precise and controlled. The rage he felt wasn't a screaming human thing. It was a cold surgical certainty. He didn't want a divorce. He wanted the upper hand. He didn't want an apology. He wanted the price of the betrayal to be exacted in a currency she valued more than their marriage: power and reputation. He sat down at his home office desk, opened his encrypted laptop, and using a secure internal firm channel, requested a copy of the preliminary Verve Digital M&A data pack he had access to months prior. The digital files arrived instantly. Daniel didn't look for love letters. He looked for anomalies, for transfers, for emails marked attorney-client privileged with unusual recipients. The city lights shimmered below, reflecting off the screen, and in the neon glow, Daniel Sterling, the devoted husband, became Daniel Sterling, the cold prosecutor. He found what he was looking for in less than 10 minutes, a single smoking gun file. He saved a highly specific, redacted screenshot of the document, a piece of evidence so volatile it could crater an IPO and expose Ethan Shaw's carefully constructed empire. He looked at his phone, waiting for the clock to cross midnight. He needed her to be fully settled into her reckless mistake before he delivered the quiet, inevitable consequence. He knew that when she woke up in LA, the relaxed honey would taste like ashes. The time was 12:03 p.m. PST. He selected the screenshot. To Clara. Message, attached one photo. He hit send. The sound the phone made, a tiny, indifferent digital chime, was the quietest explosion he had ever heard.
The morning after, the apartment felt colder, heavier. Daniel had spent the night on the couch in his study. The city sounds, the faint siren, the rhythmic hum of the elevator system, providing a sterile soundtrack to his decision. He didn't check his phone immediately for Clara's response. He knew she would still be asleep, or perhaps just waking up to the sterile luxury of the Santa Monica Hotel, enjoying the last fleeting moments of her reckless freedom. The photo he had sent her was a time bomb with a delayed fuse. He logged into his firm's secure legal databases. His firm was not directly representing Verve Digital in the upcoming IPO, but their initial advisory work had given him high-level access to certain non-confidential, preliminary M&A reports and internal communications concerning the acquisition of a smaller, specialized AI company, Aurora Labs. The sheer scale of the IPO meant every detail had to be perfectly clean. Daniel's specialty was finding the dirt. He wasn't hunting for proof of their physical intimacy. That was trivial, personal. He was hunting for the pattern of a man who thought himself untouchable. He filtered Ethan Shaw's communications, cross-referencing them with the dates Clara had started taking unusual late-night calls in the specific itinerary for this supposed last-minute summit. The narrative he constructed was professional, not emotional. Clara had flown to LA with her boss, Ethan, ostensibly to finalize the Aurora Labs deal. The first thread he pulled was a series of encrypted internal emails between Ethan and a junior investment banker. The language was deliberately opaque, using coded internal slang, but Daniel, reading between the lines, saw the classic markers of preemptive stock movement, a small, aggressive trading pattern in Aurora Labs shares just weeks before the official market-moving announcement: insider trading. It wasn't just a violation of corporate policy, it was a federal crime, a felony that would shatter Ethan's career and reputation permanently. But what did this have to do with Clara? He pulled up the redacted screenshot he had sent her last night. It was an internal memo detailing the required disclosure for all executive travel related to the Aurora Labs acquisition. The policy required 2 senior executives, neither of whom was Ethan or Clara, to be present for all off-site negotiations. The document clearly stated that a failure to adhere could be seen as a deliberate attempt to conceal negotiations from internal review, potentially invalidating certain clauses.
Clara, as director of marketing and Ethan's direct subordinate, was in LA with him, and she had her corporate laptop. That alone didn't prove her guilt, but it proved her complicity in concealing the nature of the travel from the necessary internal oversight. Daniel had sent her the proof that her romantic escape was actually a legally actionable corporate vulnerability. She wasn't just cheating, she was unknowingly covering for a crime. The air in the study felt thin. Daniel ran a hand over his face. He didn't feel righteous. He felt cold, like a weapon in his own hand. He was no longer seeking revenge, he was seeking justice. A cold, hard currency that felt more satisfying than the messy, unpredictable nature of human emotion. He could destroy her life, her career, the entire trajectory she had painstakingly built, all while remaining professionally protected, because his inquiry was based on preliminary M&A data review, not spousal jealousy. His phone vibrated. Not a text, a call. Unknown number, Los Angeles time zone. He let it ring, watching the screen.
It rang a second time, then a third. He waited for it to stop, anticipating the inevitable voicemail, the panic, the fear, the realization of what he had done. But the phone rang again, immediately, a different number, then a third moments later. She wasn't just calling, she was cycling through every disposable, untraceable number she could find, her calculated composure having evaporated into sheer, desperate panic. He picked up the phone on the fourth attempt, his voice level, professional, devoid of the hurt that was currently coiling in his chest. "Clara, I'm busy. What is it?" "Daniel, you can't do this. That memo, that's internal. How did you even get that? You have to delete it, right now. You don't understand what this means for Verve, for Ethan, for us." Her voice was tight, brittle, nothing like the relaxed confidence of the prior evening. She wasn't speaking about love. She was speaking about liability. "I understand perfectly, Clara. I'm an attorney. I always understand the documents." He paused, letting the silence expand into the void left by her betrayal. "You should have stayed home, honey." He hung up before she could reply, the weight of his calculated cruelty settling over him.
The suite at the Shutters on the Beach Hotel was designed to whisper luxury, all white linens, ocean breezes, and the promise of complete discretion. Clara stood on the balcony in a bara robe, the roar of the Pacific a dull, predictable sound below. The digital high of escaping San Francisco and the oppressive perfection of her life with Daniel had been intoxicating. Ethan was still in the main room, taking a video conference call, his voice a low, commanding rumble, the voice that had promised her validation and excitement, the voice of the power she craved. Clara's phone buzzed once on the teak railing, pulling her from the view of the endless blue ocean. It was a message from Daniel. She rolled her eyes, expecting a passive-aggressive inquiry about her flight or a detail about the dog. She opened the text. The attachment loaded instantly, a high-resolution screenshot of an internal legal disclosure form, its header emblazoned with the Verve digital logo. It detailed the stringent 2 executive requirement for all off-site negotiations concerning the Aurora Labs acquisition. Crucially, the sensitive financial figures were redacted, replaced by thick black lines. But below the redaction, Daniel had circled one line in aggressive red digital ink. Failure to comply with Section 4.3 will be treated as material non-disclosure, potentially violating both fiduciary and SEC reporting duties. The photo wasn't a picture of Clara kissing Ethan. It was a photo of a looming federal investigation. The blood drained from Clara's face. She didn't drop the phone. The sheer coldness of the shock left her rigid. This was not the action of a broken husband. This was the surgical strike of a hostile attorney. Daniel had spent a decade in the labyrinthine world of M&A law. He knew exactly which wire to cut to bring the whole structure down. The photo was the irrefutable evidence that her impulsive, selfish decision to fly to LA had been documented, analyzed, and categorized, not as an affair, but as a severe corporate compliance failure, and that Daniel held the key to proving its materiality. "Ethan?" she whispered, her voice barely audible over the sound of the waves. Ethan Shaw, finished with his call, turned, his expression softening into a practiced, charismatic smile that faltered instantly when he saw the look in his eyes. It was a look of pure animalistic fear. "Ethan, what is it? You look like you just saw a subpoena." He moved toward her, his hand reaching for her shoulder. She pulled away, holding the phone out like a live grenade. Look what Daniel sent." Ethan took the phone, his face registering several shifts in quick succession. First confusion, then annoyance at the legal jargon, and finally a chilling, profound comprehension. His smile vanished, replaced by the grim mask of a man who realized his meticulous, illegal maneuvering had just been exposed by the one person he hadn't considered a threat.
"The son of a bitch!" Ethan hissed, the professional veneer cracking completely. He found the 4C disclosure. How the hell did he access that? It was buried. "That's what he does, Ethan. He specializes in finding what's buried." Clara clutched the robe tight around her, the cold from the glass railing now sinking deep into her bones. "He's not angry about the infidelity. He's going to use this to destroy the IPO. He's going to use me to expose you." Ethan's panic quickly morphed into defensive calculation. No, we can fix this. He sent a redacted screenshot. He doesn't have the full document. He's bluffing, trying to scare us. He paced across the room, already constructing the counter-narrative. We fly back tonight. You tell him you were coerced. You tell him I forced you to take this trip against policy. Your defense is that you were an unsuspecting subordinate. He can't touch you if you claim ignorance. His words, meant to be reassuring, were the sharpest betrayal yet. Ethan wasn't worried about her. He was worried about the felony charge hanging over his own head. He was sacrificing her reputation, the small, fragile structure she had left, to save his multi-million-dollar life. Clara stared at the beautiful, powerful man who had seduced her with promises of recognition. Now he was offering her up as a fall girl. The relax honey text was a lie, but the photo was the cold, undeniable truth. The price of excitement was ruin. She needed Daniel, her betrayed husband, to save her from the man she had run away with. She reached for the room phone, her hand shaking. Daniel had hung up on her earlier, but the terror was too loud to be silenced. She needed to beg, to plead, to make him understand that he had to choose her, the flawed woman, over his cold legal justice. She dialed his number. It went straight to voicemail. She tried again, then again, overriding the phone's logic with pure desperate need. Daniel, please, pick up. I'm sorry, we can talk about everything, just please. Don't release that file. Don't do this to me. I'm begging you. She hung up, her chest heaving, the ocean breeze feeling like ice on her face. The casual calls would now become a daily ritual of desperation.
The flight back to San Francisco 2 days later was the longest, coldest trip Clara had ever taken. Ethan, pale and tense, had spent the entire time in first class arguing quietly on an encrypted line with his corporate legal team, his focus entirely on his own imminent collapse. Clara sat alone in a middle seat, her corporate luxury replaced by the anxious anonymity of the cabin, staring at the screen of her phone. The first few hours in LA had been a blur of failed, frantic attempts to contact Daniel. She had tried his office line, his personal mobile, his Signal account, even his old, rarely used private email. Every attempt was met with silence, or worse, a curt professional redirection. When she finally managed to catch him on a landline, he answered only to say, "Any communication regarding Verve Digital or the Aurora Labs acquisition must now be filtered through my counsel. Do not attempt personal contact. Goodbye, Clara." His words were devastating because they lacked any recognizable human emotion. There was no rage, no heartbreak, only the detached formality of a lawyer preparing for litigation. He had excised the husband, leaving only the prosecutor. In the San Francisco apartment, now shrouded in a permanent, heavy quiet, Clara walked the length of the court's counter where she had left her casual, dismissive text. The memory made her physically sick. Relax, honey. What had she been thinking? That she could treat a decade of commitment, a shared life, as merely an inconvenient appointment to reschedule? Now the texts were coming from her, and they were escalating in panic. Clara, Tuesday, 9:15 a.m. Daniel, please. You know I'm not involved in the M&A specifics. I was just following Ethan's directive. Don't do this to me. I need to talk to you. Clara, Tuesday, 11:40 a.m. If you file that memo externally, my career is finished. My reputation will be destroyed. Is that what you want? To ruin me entirely? Clara, 3:02 p.m. I made a mistake. A terrible, selfish mistake. I'm sorry. I love you. Please, I'm begging you. Don't choose revenge. Let's talk about our marriage. She knew, even as she typed the words, that the plea felt hollow. She wasn't begging for their marriage. She was begging for her professional life. The affair, the fleeting excitement with Ethan, was now a distant, cheap distraction. The crisis Daniel had engineered was real, immediate, and utterly terrifying. That evening, as the city lights blurred outside the window, she called him again, letting the phone ring until the automated voicemail picked up. She left a message that broke the dam of her composure. Daniel, it's Clara. I'm home. I know I hurt you, and I deserve your anger, but this is too much. That document, Ethan is panicking. He's already trying to pin the travel violation on a subordinate.
If you use this, he will not protect me, and the SEC will treat me as an accessory. You know what that means. We built this life together. Don't let a mistake, a single stupid mistake, destroy everything. I need you to choose me, Daniel, your wife. Please, I'll do anything. Just tell me what you want."
She was crying now, the sound muffled by the cool silence of the expensive apartment. She was pleading not for his heart, but for his judgment. Daniel, sitting 3 miles away in his firm's library, listening to the playback of the voicemail through noise-canceling headphones, felt nothing but a cold confirmation of his strategy. She had mentioned Ethan's panic, his deflection, the exact response Daniel had anticipated from a man prioritizing survival over loyalty. She was trapped between the husband she betrayed and the lover who was now betraying her. He deleted the voicemail. He knew that the begging would continue daily. He had shifted the dynamic entirely. She was no longer a rebellious wife seeking freedom. She was a desperate client seeking protection from the one man who had the power to destroy her, and he was the only counsel she couldn't afford to lose. But he wouldn't make it easy. The price of her redemption would be the full, agonizing realization of the cost of her lie. He knew he couldn't choose forgiveness yet. He had to decide if he was willing to trade his own moral standing for the ultimate cold control over her destiny.
The file sat inert on Daniel's encrypted server. verv-m&a-4c violation.pdf. It was a small digital packet, yet it contained the power to incinerate careers, including, by association, Clara's. He had the full, unredacted memo, the memo he had teased her with, which explicitly detailed the potential felony consequences for noncompliance during the critical pre-IPO phase. He didn't need to release it publicly. He simply needed to file it anonymously with the SEC's whistleblower program, and the subsequent investigation would do the rest. The power he wielded was absolute, and for a man whose life was built on control and precision, it was profoundly addictive. He stood in his home office, staring out at the city where they had bought the dream, where he had made partner, where Clara had climbed the corporate ladder. Every light seemed to represent a choice: the light of justice, cold and impersonal, or the dim, complex light of their shared history. He wasn't seeking financial gain, he was seeking equilibrium. He wanted the score settled, the betrayal paid for, not just in tears, but in tangible, irreversible consequence. His greatest fear wasn't losing Clara, it was losing control, and her affair had been a violent, public seizure of the control he had always assumed was his. However, a chilling realization began to creep in, undermining the foundation of his righteousness. If he released the document, he wasn't just destroying Ethan Shaw, the philandering CEO. He was implicitly using his privileged legal position, acquired through his marriage and profession, to destroy his wife. His action would be a calculated, sophisticated form of domestic violence, waged with corporate legal weapons. He picked up a framed photo from his desk, a picture of Clara and him taken 5 years prior on a trip to Martha's Vineyard. They were laughing, faces bright, unburdened. He remembered the feeling of that day, the simple, easy intimacy that had died a slow, silent death amidst the ambition and the long work hours. They hadn't fallen out of love, they had simply prioritized success over connection. His absence had created the void Ethan had filled. His conscience, a muscle long atrophied by M&A negotiations, twinged. Could he truly ruin her reputation, her future, based on a document he only obtained because he was hunting her betrayal? The line between righteous justice and spiteful revenge was dangerously thin, and he realized with horror that he had already crossed it the moment he decided to weaponize his access. He pulled up a legal analysis drafted by a colleague on the ethical implications of using privileged information from a spouse's company, even if acquired legally. The verdict was murky, but the personal implication was clear. By becoming the prosecutor in his own divorce, Daniel risked compromising his own professional integrity. If his firm ever found out he used privileged data,
even redacted or tangential, to conduct a personal vendetta, his career too could suffer a devastating non-public end. The calls from Clara continued, desperate, concise, focused entirely on the document. She hadn't once asked for forgiveness for the affair, she had only begged for protection from the consequence of his power. This reinforced his resolve. She hadn't been genuinely remorseful, she was only fearful of the price. He closed the legal analysis file and looked back at the verv-mna-4c violation.pdf. He didn't delete it. He newly moved it from his active server into a cold storage archive, accessible only by him, requiring multiple layers of encryption. He hadn't chosen forgiveness, but he hadn't chosen destruction either. He had chosen the third option, the lawyer's option, leverage. He now possessed the unacknowledged, hidden power to end Ethan Shaw's career and to guarantee Clara's complete, terrified obedience. He had traded marital integrity for absolute cold control, and the silence that followed felt less like peace and more like the grave.
The air in the Verve digital executive offices was thick with unspoken dread. The planned high fives and champagne toasts over the successful Aurora Labs acquisition had been replaced by hushed, frantic phone calls and sealed door meetings. Ethan Shaw, usually a picture of tailored confidence, looked brittle. He summoned Clara into his corner office, the panoramic view of the Bay Area mocking the narrow, confining nature of their current crisis. "Daniel is playing games, Clara. Highly illegal games," Ethan said, not looking at her but staring at a financial projection chart on his screen. "He is attempting to use privileged information for personal gain, which is a breach of his own firm's ethical code." Clara sank into the plush leather chair, her exhaustion a physical weight. "Daniel didn't release anything, Ethan. He showed me enough to tell me he knows. That's not illegal. It's effective." "It's extortion," Ethan countered, spinning his chair to face her, his eyes cold and devoid of the easy charm that had once intoxicated her. "We need to inoculate ourselves immediately." He slid a document across the desk, a meticulously worded affidavit. It stated that due to a misunderstanding of a late-night email, Clara had unintentionally advised a junior associate to book the LA travel under a non-compliant expense code, thus creating the appearance of a Section 4C violation, but assuring that CEO Ethan Shaw was unaware of the coding error. The document subtly implied that Daniel, knowing this, was attempting to leak the non-material error to sabotage the IPO after a personal dispute. Clara's hand trembled as she read the last line, which essentially made her the scapegoat for the entire corporate compliance mess, minimizing Ethan's culpability in the decision to travel without a second senior executive. "You want me to sign this?" she asked, the question laced with a bitter disbelief that superseded her fear. "You want me to take the fall for your decision to skip the proper oversight?" "It's not taking the fall, Clara. It's about protecting the company and, by extension, you. Your role as director of marketing makes this a clerical error, not a felony. If the SEC smells insider trading, which Daniel is clearly fishing for, it becomes a nightmare for all of us. This is your insurance policy. We stick to the narrative, Daniel is vengeful, and you made a mistake under pressure." The reality hit her with the force of a physical blow. She had run to Ethan seeking recognition and passion. She had found power and a profound lack of humanity. Daniel, the husband she had dismissed as cold and predictable, had warned her with a document. Ethan, the powerful lover, was now trying to save himself by trapping her in a lie that would forever taint her professional record. The affair hadn't elevated her, it had made her disposable. "If I sign this, I become the person who put the entire IPO at risk," she stated flatly, dropping the document on the desk. "The market won't care if it was a clerical error. My name will be attached to a multi-million-dollar compliance failure." Ethan leaned back, his patience snapping. "You are already attached, Clara. You were on the jet. You sent Daniel the idiotic text confirming the trip was personal. Your husband has the full power to destroy us both. This affidavit mitigates the damage to us. Now sign the document, and then you can go home and deal with the mess you made." His eyes, once full of hungry admiration, now regarded her with the clinical assessment of a necessary cost. He was not her lover. He was her executioner's assistant. Clara stood up, feeling a wave of nausea.
The emptiness of her marriage had been agonizing, but the sudden, sharp, isolating realization that she was entirely alone, that Daniel's cold cruelty was preferable to Ethan's desperate self-interest, was an emotional catastrophe. She walked out of the office without signing, leaving the document fluttering slightly on the desk, knowing that her refusal had now turned her lover into a determined adversary. She desperately needed to talk to Daniel, not to beg for her job, but to confess the true depth of her isolation and to understand why, having the power to ruin her, he hadn't used it yet.
Clara found Daniel in the apartment's library, a space usually reserved for his late-night legal briefs. He was reading a physical book, a rare anomaly for a man whose life existed almost entirely on illuminated screens. He looked up when she entered, his eyes registering her presence with a neutral, assessing gaze of a business acquaintance. There was no fire, no accusation, just a hollow absence that was far more painful than any yelling would have been. "You look tired, Clara," Daniel stated, closing the book, a volume on Roman history, and setting it precisely on the coaster. "I haven't slept since the plane landed," she admitted, her voice hoarse. "I came back here to apologize, Daniel. Not for the memo, but for him." Daniel leaned back, his posture rigid. "Your apology is noted, but I am not interested in the emotional details of your time in Santa Monica. I'm interested in the legal liabilities of your time in LA. Did you sign anything for Ethan?" His immediate deflection from the personal to the procedural was a crushing confirmation of her fears. She realized then that Daniel had already grieved their marriage. He was only conducting the cold, clean disposal of assets. "No, I didn't sign the affidavit. He tried to make me the fall girl, to pin the compliance violation on a clerical error. But I didn't do it. I couldn't." A flicker, a genuine reaction, passed over Daniel's face. It wasn't relief or forgiveness, but a grudging respect. Good. It would have jeopardized your ability to negotiate this divorce and compromised any eventual non-disclosure agreement with Verve. "I don't care about the negotiation. Don't you hear me? I don't want the money, Daniel. I ran away because I was suffocating here. I was turning into another piece of furniture in this perfect empty apartment. You stopped seeing me 5 years ago. You started seeing me as an extension of your career. I chased Ethan because he made me feel like I was worth talking to, worth desiring, not just worth displaying at a firm dinner." The raw honesty of her confession hung heavy in the high-ceilinged room. She hadn't expected him to forgive her, only to acknowledge the shared blame for the void she had filled with infidelity. Daniel rose slowly, moving to the window, his silhouette stark against the cityscape. "And do you think that absolves you? That because our marriage was empty, you get to violate the fundamental contract?" He turned, his gaze finally piercing her. "You thought the betrayal was the red-eye flight. You were wrong. The betrayal was handing me the ammunition to ruin your life." He walked over to his laptop, opened the hidden folder, and projected the full unredacted Verve M&A 4C violation.pdf. It contained the exact financial figures and the explicit legal warnings that Ethan had been trying to conceal. "I didn't send this to the SEC, Clara. I didn't send it to the Journal. I held it." His voice was low and strained, revealing the effort of his control. "Do you know what that cost me? It cost me the clean, easy vindication. It cost me the chance to prove I was the victim. I spent 3 nights staring at this file, calculating your ruin, calculating the justice of it, and I realized that if I used this weapon, I would be destroying the one person I actually loved, and doing it with a coldness that would define me more than your affair ever defined you." He hadn't protected her out of love, but out of a desperate final self-preservation, the fear of becoming truly monstrous. "I still have the power to file this, Clara. I can end your career tomorrow.
I can ensure Ethan Shaw goes down for obstruction and possibly insider trading. I chose instead to use it to secure the terms of our divorce. Ethan will resign quietly. You will lose your job effective immediately for ethical non-compliance. A clean break that saves your license but ensures you are commercially untouchable in this industry for years. You will retain enough assets to live, but you will lose the identity you valued most. His eyes were full of a terrible, quiet grief. That is the price you pay, Clara. Not for the affair, but for forcing me to become the cold prosecutor you always accused me of being. I gave you your freedom, but it came with a non-negotiable cost. The room was silent. There was no hope for reconciliation. Only the grim finality of their mutual destruction. They had both lost. Daniel trading his integrity for leverage, and Clara trading her marriage for ruin.
The divorce proceeding was swift, sterile, and conducted entirely through intermediaries. The terms were exactly as Daniel had outlined in the library. Clara retained the equivalent of her initial investment in their combined assets, enough to live comfortably, but was forced to relinquish her majority stake in the San Francisco apartment and accept a severance package from Verve Digital predicated on a signed confidentiality agreement citing undisclosed ethical breaches. It was a professional death sentence, clean but absolute. Ethan Shaw resigned 2 weeks later, citing personal health reasons and avoiding any formal legal scrutiny, a concession Daniel made to protect Clara from being dragged into a federal investigation. The $4 million IPO proceeded, now scrubbed clean of the Section 4.C violation, a testament to Daniel's ruthless efficiency. 6 months later, Clara stood in the vast, echoing space of their former apartment, now completely empty save for the boxes marked his and hers by the movers. She was dressed in casual clothes, a linen shirt and jeans, a stark contrast to the tailored armor she had worn for a decade. She was preparing to move to a modest rental in the East Bay, away from the prestige and judgment of Pacific Heights. Her career was finished in the tech world. Every informal call she made to former colleagues or headhunters ended with a polite final demurral. The story wasn't public, but the scent of scandal, the sudden silent departure of both a CEO and his director of marketing right before a massive IPO, was enough. She had achieved the freedom she craved, but it was a freedom defined by absence, no job, no husband, no social circle, no familiar path. She walked into the master bedroom. The closet was entirely empty. The sheer, unyielding silence was the new constant in her life. She realized she missed Daniel's presence. Not the man who had been her husband, but the formidable, controlling entity who had provided structure and protection, even if it had been a gilded cage. She had mistaken the lack of passion for a lack of love, and by seeking excitement, she had traded a complicated life for a devastatingly simple one. She pulled out her phone and looked at Daniel's contact. She had not called him since their final devastating conversation. The begging had stopped, replaced with a quiet, internalized acceptance of the price. Daniel, in turn, was thriving professionally. He had been offered the partnership he desired. His ruthlessness in handling the Verve scandal, which his firm perceived as a clever manipulation of corporate liabilities, confirmed his status as an M&A titan. He lived alone in the apartment now, the space feeling even colder and more immaculate. He often stood by the window at night, looking at the distant lights across the water. He had one. He had secured the assets, maintained his career, and exacted a precise, cold justice that left Clara financially sound, but professionally neutered. It was a victory measured not in joy, but in the exact absence of any emotional mess. But the silence in the apartment was deafening. The controlled rage had long subsided, leaving behind a profound emptiness that success could not fill. He had traded his wife for leverage and his humanity for control. Every promotion, every high-value closing felt like a hollow echo in the vast, silent rooms. He had been willing to destroy Clara to save himself from humiliation, only to find that the self he saved was not worth preserving. The last box Clara packed contained a small framed photo, not of Daniel, but of herself, taken before the ambition and the silence had set in, when her eyes still held genuine, easy light. She looked at it,
understanding that the greatest casualty of the affair wasn't the marriage, but the person she had been before she traded her integrity for a red-eye flight to Los Angeles. She left the key on the cold quartz countertop. The heavy door clicked shut behind her, sealing the end of their history. The price of the lie had been paid, exacted not in screams or violence, but in the cold, irreversible currency of loss and solitude.